Mark Rogers, TV, breaking down positional units across the country. We stop in the ACC. We check out Wake Forest and a positional unit that doesn't get a whole lot of glory and shouldn't get a whole lot of glory based on the last few years' performance. But this unit has to get better for the Wake Forest offense to do its thing with some pieces at running back and wide receiver that could be dynamic if, again, given the chance. We bring in Robert Reinhard from Blogger So Dear to help us out on the offensive line. Robert, probably not a whole lot of talk about the particular players along the offensive line. They're kind of faceless, as most teams are, but this is the unit that has to perform. We've talked about the running backs and the wide receiver, and there's some decent skill there, some guys to be excited about, but if this unit doesn't get it done, it's just not going to happen. And if you look at the guys that are projected to start up front, you've got some experience coming back. A couple guys that have played basically the entire season last year. A guy in Josh Harris in the middle as a senior who started in 14 and 15. Guys that have starting experience across the board. You don't find that in college football very often.
No, you don't. And I think you're absolutely correct when you say, that they're faceless, but they're really important. I mean, I think, you always want to say quarterback is probably the most important position in football and maybe even in sports. But I think for Wake Forest's season really might come down to how well this unit performs on the offensive line. As you mentioned, we do have some experience coming back. Our projected lineup, starting five from left to right, Justin Hron, he's only a redshirt sophomore, but he did start, I believe, every game last season. Ty Hayworth, redshirt senior, has starting experience. Josh Harris at center, he's a senior. He started for two seasons. Phil Haynes, redshirt sophomore, he's moving from right tackle to right guard, so we'll see how he makes that adjustment. But he does have 9 games of starting experience. And then Ryan Anderson also doing a positional change, moving from center and the guard positions to right tackle. And he has starting experience. So it's still a somewhat young offensive line, but it's older than it was a year before, and it does have more game experience. And we saw the line take a step forward last year from where it was in 2014, which was the worst offensive line in the country. So I'm somewhat optimistic, but I'm cautiously optimistic. Best football teams, you don't really talk about the offensive line as much. You talk about the skill position players and the quarterbacks. But if you look at really elite programs, they have offensive line who open up holes and make things a lot easier for the rest of the team.
And we talked about this the last time we were on, and also before we recorded here, to give some perspective on the statistical analysis of the offensive line in terms of the running game. The running game was around 3.5 yards, not quite 3.5 yards per carry across the board last year. And that was like 3 times as good as 2 years ago when the rushing attack was like 1.2, 1.3 yards per carry, which is just minuscule when you look across the country. And I talk to people obviously all the time. They cover various teams, and you look at the rushing statistics for most teams. I just talked to Baylor, 6.8, 7.4, crazy numbers per carry for these running backs. So if you could get that past that 4 yards per carry this year with a pretty stout veteran offensive line, that would bode well. But we know even if they stay healthy, Robert, you're going to need a couple more guys. Usually you play 7 or 8. So who else could be in the mix?
Alik Terry is a junior. I think he will rotate in. He can play center. I think he could also play either of the guard positions. He's a guy who started for us as a true freshman for at least some games. Now, part of that was out of sort of necessity and how the depth chart broke down, but he still does have that experience. And then we have 2 redshirt freshmen who I'm interested in as some rotational players, potentially TJ Haney and Nathan Gilliam. Those were pretty decent recruits for us in the 2015 recruiting class. And, it's worth mentioning we had 2 guys in Justin Hron and Phil Haynes, who last year is redshirt freshmen, who we had to start somewhat out of necessity. So redshirt freshmen be rotational players and not have to rely on them as much to start. And then Patrick Oosterhage is a player who may potentially compete some at guard. So, we'll see how that is. I'm certainly jealous of Baylor's rushing attack. It's like watching a completely different sport when I go from watching some Wake games to watching Baylor play offense. But, hopefully we can definitely, continue to improve that rushing attack and play a solid game of some up-tempo offense, but also a pretty good ball control and just generate first downs and try and, get a few, 3 to 4 yards per carry on first and second downs and keep us in manageable situations. That's just been our problem. We haven't been in, convertible third downs.
So, Robert, when you talk about the offense, do you expect to see, I know you can't guess from a productivity standpoint, but from a stylistic standpoint and approach, difference in what we're going to see in 2016 versus 15 in terms of run pass ratio, style of offense, anything there?
I think we'll probably try and play. I know I said some possession. We sort of try and do some unique things where we like to play fast, I think, but we don't necessarily have the horses to do it. But I mean, ideally we want to play with some tempo, but we're also somewhat conservative in that, I mean, Clawson believes in tight end play and good blocking and generating a few yards on first down. Then we'll go for it on fourth down. So he's somewhat aggressive in that, but it's a pretty conventional scheme, I would say, but pretty much just ball control and then intelligent play, try and eliminate turnovers and make big plays when you can. And hopefully the line can block long enough to get some of our receivers open, and they can beat their man one-on-one and, get a deep ball to them.
All right. So as we alluded to, there are no bigger fans of this offensive line than guys like Matt Colburn and Tyler Bell, who really need some space to do their thing and gain some yardage for this rushing attack in 2016. All right. Talking Wake Forest offensive line with Robert Reinhardt from Blogger So Dear. Robert, we always appreciate the breakdown.